everyone, and welcome to Literary Nights with Unsolicited Press. Joining me tonight are three marvelous writers, Cameron Miller, Sung Woo, and Andy Smart. And these writers are very accomplished. We are going to be hearing from novels, poetries, essays, and fiction. So join me in welcoming these three marvelous readers this evening. And as usual, we're going to go in alphabetical order, and it's going to be followed by Q&A. I want everyone to know that to hit the like button and to smash the subscribe button so that this way you can get an idea of when we're going to be on again next. You'll be notified. And also, I wanted to let everyone know that no matter where you're watching, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, or X, we will be able to see your comments. So if you want to comment, just go ahead and comment where you are, and we'll be able to see those comments, and that includes questions. So hello, everyone, and welcome. So begin with Andy Smart this evening, and he is going to be reading from two pieces. He's going to give us a tease for a new piece that he's working on and something a little less new. So welcome, Andy. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your book and what you're going to be reading?
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm really excited to hear from my fellow readers. It is always nice to be in the company of writers. Thank you so much. My memoir, The More You Hate Me, came out in 2022. It is about my father's suicide, gun violence, toxic masculinity, using the movie Full Metal Jacket as a frame. And without further ado, I'd like to read to you from that. This is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one is mine. The Marines in Stanley Kubrick's Vietnam War film pray to the violent gods of duty in this way. As the camera glosses over each face, it lands on Leonard Gomer Pyle Lawrence, the overweight fuck-up who is abused by his drill sergeant to the point of madness. The prayer goes on. My rifle is my best friend. It is my life. At the end of Act 1, Pyle blows his brains against the wall of the latrine. My name's Andy, and on June 15th of 2007, my dad Jeff shot himself in the head in my backyard. Like Gomer Pyle, he was fat, in the service, and the victim in the story of his life. Dad watched Full Metal Jacket like some men watch the news or read the Bible, to find truth or guidance. He watched that film like some men look into a mirror, to see themselves as others do. But in the end, my father watched Kubrick's movie over and over again to work up the crazy brave to take ownership of himself. Before he pulls the trigger, Gomer Pyle leers at the camera and says, I am in a world of shit. It's a phrase my old man echoed often throughout his life. This book is not a love song for the dead or a tribute to the cinematic genius of Kubrick, nor is it a roadmap, an atlas of the desolate country of suicide. This is my father. There are many like him, but this one is mine. Thank you. I would like now to read to you from something a bit different. It is very new, but it also touches on, unfortunately, my experiences with even more gun violence. What I know about murder today is there's never only one victim. Should I have known that before? Probably. But what I knew about murder 8 years ago this past Tuesday was that cops arrested folks for doing it when they weren't busy doing it themselves. It was newsworthy unless it happened to the wrong person, in which case no one gave a shit. Murder was a gathering of crows. May in the Midwest is either hot or cold, and it's either raining or a drought. We don't do well with the middle here in Middle America. My second cousin Lucas had been sober for 23 months until Valentine's Day of 2016. By Memorial Day, he was dead. That year, May was cold. When the cops found Lucas on the cellar steps behind his mother's house, they wondered without saying so if his lips were blue from heroin, death, or the chill in the air. He'd been shot 4 times in the chest. But that doesn't make you turn blue, necessarily. Here's where the middling effect of a true story comes in. I don't know what happened next, but it was something. Something distracted the cops, maybe a radio call, but they forgot about Lucas, the holes in him, and who might have put them there. They forgot that the rain last month was supposed to bring flowers this month, and even if it did, they'd be funeral flowers now. They forgot to look for who killed a dead junkie. They forgot to find them, too. Murder was a truth you could debate even while looking at it. Murder was unremarkable, so much so you could forget it most of the time. Lucas's murder happened when it could still be forgotten, I guess. Thank you. That's all I have tonight. Thank you very, very, very much.
Very, very powerful, words, and very prescient for today as well. Cameron, would you like to read from your book of poetry, essays, and short stories?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, this is a memoir also, a little bit different. It's some 44 years of professional life. So it's a little bit different than a typical memoir. But it is personal and intimate, just the same. It's a close-up of my profession that includes stories about those I've encountered, as well as, but mostly about my own experience. I have been an Episcopal priest for 44 years, and so this is in that sense, professional memoir. It's Karn, which was my first book of poetry collection, which was poems and essays. This is similar in that it's 4 short stories, 12 500-word essays, 2 confessions, and 34 poems, 4 of which are a new sort of genre I'm calling sermonic poems. And what this in this first one I'm going to read you is one. The genesis of the idea of sermonic poems were that I write a weekly newspaper column, and over the years I would try to take a Sunday sermon and shrink it into a 500-word essay for the newspaper, taking out the religion and making it sort of generally generic, I suppose, generic spirituality in some sense. And so after a particular poem that after a particular sermon I did, I thought, I wonder if I can do the same and create a poem. And so this is an Easter poem. It was an Easter sermon. It was inspired by the Marie Howe poem, What the Living Do, and something that a Finger Lakes poet on a Zoom of Just Poets, which is a Rochester, New York-based poetry community, said. So here it is. It's called The Dance Between Grief and Gratitude. When grief begins, it's anything but ordinary. It is a trauma landing with the force of a horse sitting down on its rider. But eventually it works its way into the ordinary, that old grief. We start talking to the dead person we miss as if he or she is standing next to us, and as if it's not weird that we're talking out loud to someone who has died. We just do it because it's become ordinary. When our heart finds its place in gratitude, grief becomes ordinary. When gratitude becomes big enough or deep enough or just plain solid enough, it holds the grief. Before the ordinary, grief holds everything else, including gratitude, so it isn't ordinary yet. It is still the dragon guarding the entrance of our mind and heart and letting nothing pass without first being singed or outright scorched. But one day, the dragon goes missing, and the other things in the cave of our mind and heart start interacting with the grief, and the grief becomes conversational. And then, if we allow it, gratitude for the person who has left us grows and grows and grows and starts to collect the grief in its arms. The grief is still there, but now it's held by gratitude and becomes more ordinary. Then one day, without warning, without planning, we're living again. It feels odd at first, but then gradually we're thrilled to be living again. Can you imagine what it would be like if we all got to do what Luke said Jesus did? You know, die and then walk around living? Well, if we did that, then we'd all write poetry like Mary Oliver. We would walk around savoring every small thing we had rarely noticed when we were alive, and we'd just touch it or kiss it or hold it. A single blade of grass would be so marvelous it would make us cry. A snowflake would take our breath away. A toad hopping in the grass, or a worm writhing in the soil, or the diamonds the sun scatters on the morning waves would make us swoon. We would walk around savoring every small, delicious molecule of life, just dripping with gratitude. Thinking about Jesus being like Mary Oliver, walking around, looking and touching and oohing and eyeing at every small and delicate thing that never begged to notice before, makes me want to try it. What if on Monday mornings we oogled and savored? What if we slowly ate the sunrise? What if we very slowly breathed in the scent of love? What if we ran our fingers along a smooth wood finish and stuttered helplessly over every grain? What if we peeled an apple and sobbed at its clean, simple lines and stunning colors? 5 minutes, only 5 minutes. 5 minutes once a week, savoring the world as if we were the dead, given one last chance to encounter bodily life through gratitude. Oh, to be Jesus back from the dead, savoring every small thing life has to offer and getting blown away by beauty, even on the battlefield of grief. Maybe that's what resurrection is, to come to life in the midst of life and fall head over heels in gratitude. The next thing I'd like to read is a 500-word essay, if I have time to do that. It's called Acts of Love. At a family-related party in a bar, a woman with her teenage daughter introduced herself and thanked me for saving her brother's life. The daughter chimed in, adding how important her uncle is to her and thanking me as well. Now, that's an introduction that will get my attention. They were referring to events that happened a decade previously, fresh and wet for them, but for me, I needed to squint down the long sleeve of memory in order to see what and who they were talking about. I did not save his life, of course. It was his willingness to acknowledge a power greater than himself that led to his sobriety, and his willingness to enter the community of other alcoholics and do the work he needed to do. All I did was tell him what I noticed. I know the feeling that someone has saved your life, though, even if only because they said something. Some years ago, I went to the doctor for a routine physical. Quite soon after entering the room, he asked me how I was sleeping. That question led to a 45-minute conversation that centered on the fact that I'd become a workaholic, obsessed with fulfilling a task that was impossible for me to redeem. As I look back on it now, it began an intervention that would slowly evolve over several years to save my life. At the end of the conversation, I asked my doctor why he'd asked me how I was sleeping. "You look tired," is all he said. It was more than the words, of course. The insurance company probably paid him for 7 minutes of his time with me. In the time management reviews of the medical practice that month, he probably received demerits for taking too long with a patient on a routine annual checkup. In fact, that doctor left the practice soon after and went into some other field of medicine. I remain forever grateful to him. Most of the time, it's very small things that make a difference. It's the accumulation of many small things that finally creates transformation. In our glampy, celebrity-studded, everything hyped media culture, we can get fooled into thinking it's the big things, the famous people, the power lunches that do things that change the world. But it is ordinary people doing the small things that lead to transformation. Small words spoken at just the right time or said just the right way, with our hearts and minds open at precisely the right moment for small words to enter, can make all the difference. Small acts of love, even teeny tiny ones, add up. Small acts of love added to small acts of love, accumulating over time, pushing the balance toward transformation, is how big change for the better happens. Often, we only see the sum total of all those events, not each one itself. But the physics of change is built upon the diminutive rather than the big and the glitzy. Every cultural and political movement in history that finally transformed the body politic were granular and built to a swell over time until reaching the tipping point of change. Every grain is significant to the outcome. It's easy to become cynical and hopeless in our time, confronted as we are by an onslaught of information weighted heavily with the dramatic, traumatic, and awful. But it is our willingness to continue these small acts of love, one step at a time, that will lead us to a new and a better world. Thank you very much. Thanks to Unsolicited Press for allowing us this evening.
Very beautiful work and very poignant. Okay, Sung, are you ready to tell us about your novel and to do some reading?
Sure. Yep. My name is Sung Woo, and this is my novel. It's titled Lines. This is an ARC, an advanced reader's copy. It's going to be published in October 29th. And as you can see here, that arch is from, well, you may not know unless you're in the area. It's from Washington Square Park in New York City. And that's where the beginning of this novel takes place. And I'm just going to read the prologue, which is just a few pages long. So I will start.
Before you begin, can you just give us the elevator pitch about the novel so we know what
Sure.
we're hearing?
Yes, thank you. You know what? The best way to describe this novel is through a movie that was from about 20 years ago, I think, and change. It's a movie called Sliding Doors that starred Gwyneth Paltrow. And the conceit of that movie is that she is on her way to get back to her apartment where I think she's with her boyfriend, lives there. And this is when the movie forks. She gets on the train, on the subway, and she gets home. And then she misses the subway and does not get home. And at that point, the movie takes parallel paths. And same conceit here. I have a writer and a painter. And it's kind of two lines. And that's why it's titled Lines. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the prologue. Our story begins 5 years ago on a cool and damp Saturday morning in the city of New York. The street is Fifth Avenue, downtown. Parked cars line both sides of the road, their windshields dotted with dew. We're a block away from Washington Square Park, the imposing arch screwing up his shoulders. The first sentence of the inscription engraved into the stone at the top of the monument reads, "Let us raise a standard to which the wise and the honest can repair." The second sentence is shrouded in fog along with the rest of this famed structure. In fact, the mist is so thick and pervasive that the few natives who are out at this early hour of 7 o'clock walk at a tourist's pace. The rising sun is burning off this white cloak that has descended upon the city, which will remain for another 3 minutes and 26 seconds. That is not much time, but enough for what is and is not about to transpire. If we keep walking on Fifth, we'll pass right through the arch. But we won't do that. Instead, we're going to watch two people approach one another. The man who enters our view from the left is Joshua Kozlov, 5'10", clean-shaven, of Belarusian origin, but by name only, i.e. his favorite dessert is apple pie, and he would not know a babushka from a balaclava. He turned 40 yesterday. He wasn't happy about it then, and he isn't happy about it now. He hates his birthday. He hates all birthdays, but that's a rude thing to say to people who like their birthdays. So he keeps this opinion to himself. Not that he cares about what others think. Actually, he does more than he cares to admit. What is important is that there is no birthday he hates more than his own, and a milestone one like this makes it 100 times worse. The big 4-0. Where's your cane? Don't forget your depends. Friends and family have been gushing, prodding, and joking all week. At least it's over. He wants to start the new decade of his life with purpose and meaning, which is why he's now marching down Washington Square North with grim, grave determination. The woman who enters from the right is Abby Kim, 5'3", long-haired, a methodical long-distance cycler of South Korean origin. 29, her family immigrated when she was 12, so she remembers the old country, but far less than one might imagine. Like she's unable to recall a single student in 5th grade, her last class before she departed for America. Not one, and not even the teacher. She must have had friends, right? Maybe not. Maybe she ate lunches by herself at her desk, staring at the blackboard. Except she cannot remember what she ate, the desk where this alleged consumption took place, or the vaguest notion of a blackboard. Instead, what has been indelibly etched on her brain is a walking bridge she used to cross with a tin container in hand, about the size of a cigar box. On the other side of the river was an old woman who squatted against a crumbling brick wall and sauteed slivers of rice cake in hot pepper sauce. Abby gave her 500 won, about 50 cents, in the empty container and watched the woman, who was toothless and always humming some unfamiliar song, ladle up steaming scoops of the tteokbokki. The woman filled the container to the brim, too much, as when she closed the lid, some of the red goop squeezed out. But that was just fine with Abby. She didn't even wait until she got home to eat, just used her fingers to extricate one red medallion at a time, tangy, spicy, gooey goodness. Abby is not hungry, but as she nears the midpoint of Washington Square North, her mouth waters and she's delighted by this Pavlovian response. Her mind telling her body what to do. She walks a little faster. 14 seconds from now, enough of the fog will have lifted that the island of Manhattan will come back into focus. The second sentence of the arch's inscription, shorn of the haze, now proclaims, "The event is in the hand of God." Is it God? Or are we in the realm of brain-cramping quantum mechanics? Doesn't matter. Let us observe the events as they unfold, two of them occurring simultaneously. We know this is not what we witness in our daily quotidian lives, but take our word for it, both lines are happening right now. If this were a movie, the screen would split in half. Joshua and Abby run into each other, and Joshua and Abby miss each other. In the first line, upon impact, they fall to the ground in an instinctually protective hug. The fog dissipates and they stare into each other's eyes in disbelief at the physicality of their bodily collision and their subsequent spontaneous coupling. They laugh. They rise and dust each other off. Joshua invites Abby for coffee, and they end up talking until lunch. They date. They fall in love hard. They marry just 2 months later. And in the second line, they pass through the fog, oblivious of each other's existence until 5 years later, when Josh, in his suburban home in New Jersey, finds himself in front of his computer to peer at an oval shaped locket no bigger than his thumbnail, at the impossibly tiny white dress painted within the boundary of its golden border. And that thing is right there, if you can see it. This book has artwork in it, as you can see. It's in the front cover, inside cover, and the back inside cover. And these are real paintings. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Did you do the paintings, Sung? Are they
Oh,
your
God.
paintings?
No. These are paintings by an artist. Her name is Dina Brodsky, and she is a miniaturist. She operates out of Brookline, Massachusetts. That's where she is now.
Really wonderful. I want to thank you all for sharing your work with us. So now we come to the Q&A part of our literary nights. So I want to ask each of you, and you can go whoever in turn, however you want, is what inspired your books? I mean, other than your life, was there a particularly inciting event, or well, with Andy, I know what that inciting event was, but what finally gave you the courage and the energy to sit down and actually write? Writing is hard work. So
Yeah,
what finally made you make that commitment?
I think what made me, it's a horrible pun, but what made me pull the trigger and start the project was I got into an MFA program. And then, knowing that I was going to have 2 years of time where I was expected to write intensely and to write close to the bone about things that were important to me, I knew that I'd wanted to do this project for several years, and I knew that it could be done and had to be done and could be done well. And knowing that I was going to have that kind of support system for a couple of years, I think that was the impetus. That's what really got me to start writing. And I actually finished the book my first semester of grad school with my faculty mentor. So it was a really good, really special experience.
Oh, wow. Was it your thesis for the MFA?
No, actually, I wrote
for the MFA.
I actually wrote a separate thesis for my MFA.
That's really all that work.
I like to stay busy.
And Cameron Sung, what gave you the impetus to actually sit down and write your work? What was that thing that caused you to sit in that chair and become committed to putting words on the page? Sung, do you want to start, since you have such an interesting conceit for your novel?
Sure. Yeah. This is sorry, my phone's alarm. This is my fifth novel, so I've done this a few times. And the reason why this book came to be is because I met the artist. I was getting a little gift for my wife, and she was a very cool lady. And it's like, so she's a miniaturist. She only makes paintings that are really small. The paintings that are featured in this book are 2 inches in diameter. So it's tiny brushes, and I found this to be fascinating. And they're almost always circular. So looking into these paintings, it's kind of like looking into a porthole of some other life or some other place. And then that's what really kind of gave me the idea. It started out slowly. I actually wrote flash fiction pieces for about 20 of her works. And then I realized this could be a bigger work. And those flash fiction pieces actually appear in this book as stories that were written by the writer character. Yeah.
Nice.
Hmm.
And Cameron,
Yeah.
your book is a little bit of everything, and your poems were really very poignant, especially for anyone who's ever lost a loved one. The one about grief really resonated. So, how did you? I mean, you were writing sermons all the time. How did you get to the point where you wanted to make a book that contained a lot of different elements in it?
Well, in December 2022, I was really, I felt like I floundered through the pandemic in terms of writing. I wrote some stuff, but I just did, wasn't producing anything, and I had some health issues, and so I decided to go on retreat in December in Bar Harbor, Maine. So if you've ever been there in the winter, it's a pretty cold, isolated place, beautiful nonetheless. Anyway, so I went and I started looking through what I had written during the pandemic and some before that, and it jumped out at me that it was a memoir. It was a lot of it about grief, but it was sort of begging to be completed, and so that's what I did, and uh, yeah, it's a memoir that's really about.
Well, it's very prescient.
In what way? I'm sorry, what?
Well, when you think about the pandemic, 1.5 million Americans died, and that means a lot of families, 1.5 million families, were impacted by all that loss.
Yeah.
And I think that we continue to be impacted.
Yes, and one of the things about my profession, whatever religion it is, clergy tend to attend with families through their grieving process, and so there's a lot of grief. I mean, we become carriers of grief in some ways, as well as caring for people in their grief.
That actually featured
So, Andy,
quite
I
a
think
bit.
that might be something you could speak to too.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Yeah.
Specifically clergy. After my father died, I mean, obviously, uh, depending on your flavor of Christianity, suicide is a mortal sin punishable by an eternity in hell. So our local pastor came to the house and checked on my mother and I asked him, point blank, again, terrible pun, but I asked him what he thought, and he said, "Well, I wrote my Master's of Divinity thesis on suicides in the Bible, so the answer is no, I don't think so." And it was, yeah, right. I mean, what are the odds? Um, but yeah, carrying grief for yourself and for others, especially like Cameron was saying, at a time when we were so alone, a lot of us, yeah, it was really brutal. And had it not been for writing, I mean, I didn't produce anything worth much, but had it not been for having the work to go to, I would have been in a bad way.
And your dad was a veteran. There's still a
Yes,
great
he was.
issue with veteran suicides. I think we're 22 a day now
Mm-hmm.
of veteran
And
suicides.
it's alarming to me. It's alarming to me how many people look at suicide prevention and gun legislation as separate issues, and they are not at all. The availability of lethal means increases the odds that a person will take their own life exponentially. So, it's an important thing to me, and whether people acknowledge it or not, it's an important thing to our society.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but the VA has a free gun lock program where they just distribute gun locks to veterans. They're out in baskets at most VA medical centers. So it's a part of the suicide prevention because they do recognize that having lethal means around causes, it doesn't cause, but it can, having the lethal means locked with the gun lock can actually give that person the extra time that they need to think about what they're thinking about doing, to actually think about it. So, Song, yours is kind of like a love story, a bit. One of the lines is a love story. How hard was it to go back and forth with the same characters in two different lines? In one, they're actually part of a love story, and in the other, they're not. So how was it to keep? Because when you think about it, it's, even though it seems like it's two characters, it's actually four, because there's the two characters that fall in love, and then there's the two characters that miss each other. So how did you keep all of those same characters in the different lines straight as you were trying to write the lines?
Yeah, I think some people think maybe the right thing to do would be to write two books, like one that's just one line and one and the other, and then just kind of splice them in. But I didn't write it that way. I wrote them in order, basically, shot them in sequences in film speak. And it worked out that way for me because I had to dovetail the two lines together. In both lines, for example, Abby is pregnant, and her pregnancy goes all the way through in like real time. It's basically, in fact, that the span of the book is 9 months, basically mirroring exactly the time that she is pregnant until her delivery. Yeah, I mean, I called this story not exactly a love story. It absolutely is, but it's also a hate story because they really hate each other in the other line. So really, it's a relationship story because even in the one in the other line where they are with other people, it doesn't really work out there either in any real way. I mean, not to spoil anything, but there's difficulty no matter where they are. There's challenges. The other fun thing that I had while I was writing this
Well, that makes a good novel.
Yes, yeah. Is that so in the line that they are together and miserable, they are with other people, as in Joshua is with a coworker named Marlene, and they're very friendly. She's kind of like his work wife. And in the other, Joshua is not together with Abby. He and Marlene are married. Um, and there's another guy, Ted, who is kind of serves the same function. So there are these four characters that are playing different parts, whether it's one line or the other. Yeah, I mean, I had a fun time writing this thing because it was a challenge for sure, because my other novels are not like this. They are not so fractured. But yeah, but each novel is its own thing. Nothing is, it's never been easy for me, no matter what I'm writing.
Those are such important words. So let's talk a little bit about the writing process. Do you each write every day? Do you keep journals? How do you approach your craft? So that you can have, you have five, how many, like, I'm sure people have more than just one work that they're working on. Do you go back and forth? So talk a little bit about the writing process and the discipline. And Cameron, let's start with you because you've had many years of writing, having to write with a weekly deadline, something that would be moving people. So did you just transfer that to something to put in a book? Like, how, did it inform your process to write sermons?
And it informed my, yes. I mean, writing is a discipline. I mean, it doesn't depend on inspiration. In the same way, and if clergy wait till Saturday night to write their sermons, it's going to be a dog, and other people will pay for it. So, and then I write this newspaper column that's 500 words, and so that's another discipline of really focus. And so a lot of doing both the sermons and the column, and then poetry around those sort of creates the process. Although I'm trying to retire fully from my job as a preacher, and so that I can give full time to writing. And I have a couple novels well started, but eventually left for lack of time. So I'm excited about being able to get back to those and maybe discover other ones as well.
So do you write every day at a specific time, or
I have writing blocks.
Do you write every day at a specific time?
I write.
Okay.
Yes, I write in the mornings. I have writing blocks every morning, pretty much. Yeah, but not always about the same thing. So it's I'm writing in different forms.
And how about you, Andy?
Oh, dear Lord.
What is your process? Do you write every day?
I wish I wrote every day. I wish I had that kind of, I wish I could make that kind of commitment. I write a lot, but I don't have any kind of set program. I tend to take and this is probably the only time that I will advocate for taking advice from Charles Bukowski, but I read once, he said, if you feel like it is going to come out of you if you don't write it, that's when you're ready. I feel like a lot of times that kind of does happen to me. Like something will just keep nagging at me and I can't ignore it anymore. And that's when I'm ready to sit down and start writing it out. But I will say this, I draft in my head almost constantly. Like I'll get an image or part of a sentence and I'll start turning it over and polishing it and playing with the syntax. I'll be sitting at work and be like, is that really the operating metaphor that we want? Yeah. So I don't write physically as much as other people do. I do. I am always in process.
And how about you, sung with 5 novels already done? I am definitely interested to know how you accomplished 5 novels.
I try to write every day. Whether I actually do or not, it all depends. But I always give myself the time to do so. I almost exclusively work in the mornings, kind of like Cameron. It's like I have a harder time working later in the day. Things just too many things accrue in my head. My first novel I wrote by going to work 1 hour later than starting an hour later. So I was working whatever 9 to 5, but then I asked my boss, "Can I work 10 to 6?" And she was like, "Fine." So I stayed at home 1 more hour, and that's really all I did. I didn't spend that much more time during the weekend or anything, and it took 2 years. So I always tell people, like, you can, if you just kind of keep at it and keep trying, because if you break that down, it's like 700 days, right, and change, or 720 or whatever, 730. And then it's like if you can just generate, half a page, it's like a book, you know. Yeah, that's how I've written all of my books. I have never really taken a significant amount of time off or anything. I work slowly and methodically, and I always give myself the opportunity to write. It doesn't always happen. I sit down sometimes, a lot of times in front of the laptop, and nothing happens for an hour. Nothing comes out, and that's okay because it just means I'm just still trying, and trying does eventually pay off. I can guarantee you. Yeah.
I once heard Joyce Carol Oates say that she was a very slow writer and that sometimes she only writes a sentence and then the next day she will go back and change that sentence. But when I was gobsmacked when she said that because she's one of the most prolific and productive people that I have
Yeah, that's
ever,
great.
whose works are out there. And when she said, "I'm a very slow writer," oh my gosh, you know. So, what do you want aspiring writers to know? People who, a lot of times before you get a book published, people are always, oh my gosh, I want to get my book published. I want to write something to get my book published. But then afterwards, it's like nothing much really changed. You're still in the same place, except you're working on a different project. So, what do you want aspiring writers to know about being a writer, or about being a writer more than being published, being a writer? Andy, do you want to start?
Sure. I would say, especially for anyone who's working on a project like mine, a memoir about a traumatic loss, please, for the love of all things holy, do not count on the book to rid you of your pain. It is a way of dealing, it is a way of processing, but above all, at least for me, and in my humble opinion, this is the way to make good art, is to focus on making a piece of art, not on dealing with your trauma. It can be healing, it can be cathartic, but by all means, seek professional help, seek help from clergy or from friends or other writers. Please, please don't trust your book to save you.
Very, very excellent and wise advice. Sung, what would you like aspiring writers to know about being a writer?
Yeah, I mean, a much wiser writer friend of mine and mentor, Stuart Onan, has always told me, and I abide by it. At the end of it, it's just whatever you leave on the page that really matters. I, 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 I think that's really the best way to handle it. Yes, of course, publication is the ultimate goal for the end product. But really, the goal is for you to just express yourself in this way that you want to do it. There's another quote by that wonderful writer Isaac Dinesen, who said, write a little every day, without hope and without despair. Just write. And I really think that's the best way to handle it, because everything else, things will happen as they happen, and if they do, that's great. If they don't, that's okay too. You just, the main thing is just keep going, and doing the work that you want to do, which is, if you're a writer, that's what you want to do. You want to write, and that's because you want to do it. It's not for any other reason but just to do that, to express yourself through the written word.
We have such wise words tonight. And what about you, Cameron? What would you want aspiring writers to know?
I would sort of piggyback on both what Andy and Sung said, and that poetry, writing I love I've loved poetry my whole life, but I didn't start writing it till 2013. And writing poetry taught me to look at the world, to look and listen, to observe and see the world in a different way. And I think that that's what writing, being a writer, has done for me, is to cause me to have a different relationship with the world, and the world around me, and that's what writing does. And whatever happens after that is, icing on the cake, because it's a huge gift.
What wonderful! I always feel inspired at the end of these, because it's always so wonderful to hear how other writers approach what is a very difficult thing. A lot of people think that they could sort of write something on their way to catching a bus, but it's actually hard work and butt in chair. And I would like to add another thing. I hope aspiring writers out there actually read, because our greatest teachers have already shown us in their own works. They've given us examples of actually how to do things. So I hope people take all of your advice and add reading to it. We're nearly at the end of the show, and I would like to remind people out there to hit the like button and subscribe. I also want to remind everyone that in order to pre-order or purchase these books, you could go to unsolicitedpress.com and click on books, and you'll be able to either get pre-ordered book or get the if the book is already published, like Andy's is. I actually have Andy's book. I haven't read it yet, but I do have it. I bought it at the last AWP. So and very looking forward to reading that. And also, that our next nights with Unsolicited Press is June 26th at 8:30 Eastern Time and 4:30 Pacific Time. So I hope you'll all come back and join us then. Thank you to everyone out there who has listened to this reading, and leave comments if you want wherever you are, and so we can see them. And good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.